Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. My name is Matthew, and today I'm joined by Aditya Khosla, who is the CTO and board member of Iterative Health, based out in Boston. Quite a mouthful. Did I get it right?
Yes, you do.
Fantastic. Good. How are you today?
Very good, very good. Very excited to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about Iterative Health. Tell us about the company, tell us about your involvement, and then we'll go in a circle and we'll find out how you got there and what advice you have for our viewers and listeners.
For sure. Yeah. So, Interative Health is a company focused on artificial intelligence for gastroenterology. So, essentially, we built AI tools to help physicians, improve, to help them better take a look at, say, colonoscopy. So we're using, things like computer vision to look at colonoscopies to help generate insights. So primarily, we actually have two products. One which is called clinical trial optimization, which is where we help match patients to the right clinical trials. And the second product is called Scout, which is for identifying polyps in real time. So polyps are a precursor to cancer. And by helping physicians find polyps, you can, potentially reduce the likelihood of colon cancer developing for the patients in the future. Those are the two main products on the market. We have others that are, in development, but these are sort of the two main ones. To answer your question about my role there, so I am the Chief Technology Officer. So the functions that report to me are product, program, engineering, and machine learning. And I also serve as a board member for the company.
Okay, wow. That's pretty cool. You've been there for a few years now. How long have you been with Iterative Health?
Yeah, it's been just over a year.
Okay, just over a year. And things are going well. You enjoy it. Tell us how you got involved. How did you end up where you are today?
That's a broad question. Maybe
But I mean,
we can
specifically with this company in this position.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to share that. So I think one of the interests. So basically, I mean, one of my general interests has always been in applying artificial intelligence to healthcare. Prior to Iterative, I founded this company called PathAI, and we can maybe talk about that after. But during that time, I had actually been an advisor to the CEO, John at Iterative, and I had the good fortune of learning a lot about how Iterative was doing, learning about where the company was going. It's been on a fantastic growth trajectory with both of these products that I previously mentioned being launched, being very well received in the market. And so I, had a chat with John, being like, "Hey, John, do you have a, Aditya's shaped hole at Iterative?" And he was like, "Yes." Because I mean, it was a little bit unexpected for him, because I had, founded this company. That company had been doing well, but fortunately, he was like, "Yes, we could, use you at Iterative." So we chatted about it, figured out a good role, and here I am. I think the big thing that brought me to Iterative, apart from of course the business picking up, was the impact that the company can have on patient lives, right? And that's a similar story for me for founding the previous company, PathAI. But also here, the impact on patient lives is tremendous. Where as I said, you can help identify polyps as one example, to reduce the incidence of cancer potentially, as well as match patients to clinical trials, which is also extremely valuable because it can allow, life-saving drugs to come to market faster. So the position combined with the mission really, and of course the people, those things worked out really well for me, and that's how I decided to be here.
Very nice. Fantastic. You got a PhD in computer science from MIT, amongst other things that I found on the internet. And did you know when you were studying, okay, this is what I'm going into. I want to get involved with AI. I want to bring technology into the medical field. Was that always going on? You mentioned that you started a company before Iterative Health. Was this a long-term plan? Speak us through that a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the funny thing, it was absolutely not anywhere in the plan. When I started when I went into my PhD, I mean, first off, even doing a PhD was not initially in the plan, and definitely hadn't thought about like working in AI for maybe until my master's. So I think it's maybe I'll just talk a little bit about both of those pieces of the journey. So initially, when I started my undergrad, I was so unfocused. I guess you can call it unfocused. I ended up doing 3 majors. So I was like, let me do electrical engineering, computer science, and economics, because I couldn't make up my mind. So I was like, let me just try and do all of them. And during that time, I was fortunate, to be able to actually try doing research in a variety of different areas. I worked in a wet lab for some time. I worked on some super mathematical stuff. I worked on, a little bit more of the practical stuff, probably closer to machine learning, not exactly how it is today. And during that time, I learned a few things about myself. One, I'm terrible in a wet lab, so not going to go there. I am not, I like math, but not to the extent of the super math people. And for me, what is nice is, doing something a little bit in between, which is like has some basis in math, but is also practical. And that's sort of where I ended up, going into artificial intelligence. Then went to Stanford for a couple of years for my master's, where I really, really started to build a very strong interest in AI. And then after Stanford, I hadn't really thought, like I was thinking about doing a PhD at the time, but what really it's a weird story, but what really solidified it for me was, my wife was pursuing her PhD at MIT at the time, and I basically, everyone was like, oh, your wife's going to be studying, a lot more than you. She's going to be much more accomplished. And so I was like, all right, I guess I got to do a PhD as well. And so I was like, okay. And MIT is not a bad place to do it. So ended up there. But once there, I was very dead set on being in academia. So my goal from the very beginning of the PhD was like, I'm going to be a professor. That's what I want to do with my whole life. I'd actually never wanted to be in the field of healthcare, if I'm being honest. Like my initial, from an early, so there's another weird fact about me, but from an early age, I was very much I have a deathly fear of like blood and such. So it's kind of ironic that I ended up here, where, literally, I think I was maybe 14 or something like that, just doing a routine blood test, and I fainted because I was like, I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, this, what is happening here? And I just literally passed out. And so since that time, I'm like, I don't think I can be in anything related to healthcare or, biology and so on. So never studied that through high school or anything. Was very much just focused on the math, math, chemistry, physics, those type of things. But right as I was ending my PhD, I got a random cold email. So, maybe there's a plug for sometimes you get some emails, you might want to reply to some of them. But essentially, I got a cold email from my co-founder, Andy. He was, a very accomplished person. Basically, he was a professor at Harvard, had a medical degree as well as a PhD in machine learning. He reached out saying, hey, you want to grab a cup of coffee? And I was like, this guy seems cool. So we grabbed coffee. And the first time I met him, so the company was focused on like artificial intelligence for pathology, right? The first time I met him, I was like, Andy, what the hell is a pathologist? Like, why do you guys exist, right? Like, that's how little knowledge I had of the medical domain. And after learning about how important the work is that, he and other pathologists are doing, I was like, this is amazing. So just to give you a background, because not, again, as you can tell from myself, not everyone knows about pathology. But essentially where pathology comes in is if, let's assume like if someone has some symptoms, right? They go to the clinic, you might do an x-ray. Turns out there's a tumor somewhere, right? So now the question is that tumor cancer or not, right? So what they would normally do is they would do a biopsy. So they would, take a needle, poke it in the tissue, take out a small piece of tissue, and it is the job of the pathologist to look at that tissue under a microscope to say, do you have cancer or not, right? As you can imagine, that is pretty damn important, right? Like you want to know, like with a high level of certainty whether you're suffering from cancer or some other disease, and that obviously can change the entire course of your life, right? And so I was like, okay, this is a very, very important problem, kind of important, right? And so that was one. And then what was surprising was learning about some of the studies that had been done about pathology, where they talked about how much variability actually existed in the diagnosis. And so I was like, wow, that is, it was shocking to me that we couldn't tell with a high level of certainty whether or not somebody has cancer, right? So there are a large fraction of cases where we can, but there are definitely some where it's still quite difficult. And so I was like, okay, can we, like, that's super important. That's a great problem to solve. And can we use, so the next question for me is, can we use technology to solve it, right? Because otherwise I'm not very useful here, right? Like my work, like what I had learned was all related to technology and artificial intelligence. And, I knew nothing about medicine, right? So for me, that was the next question. So the thing that we did was we looked at a number of like data, like number of samples together. So Andy showed me that, hey, here's, a few different samples. Here's how I go about diagnosing cancer. Here's some of the things people miss, right? And we looked at that data together, and I was, in a few minutes, I was able to say, okay, is this cancer or not, right? And that was very helpful. Like that was super interesting. And I was like, okay, I think we can build an AI to do this. And so that's sort of where we got started and built up this company. And the company's been doing, I would say, pretty well overall. Yeah, happy to get into that. I know it was maybe a longer answer than you had expected.
No, it was absolutely perfect. Thank you. The more information we get, the better. What I like to tell people is that it's always interesting for our viewers and our listeners to see the different ways that people get into things. And what I found very interesting about your story was the fact that you said you had no medical experience before this. You had a fear of blood, perhaps. You had all these things going on, and one email later, and you started on this pathway, and it's fantastic. You had the knowledge and the training and the know-how, and you've put all of these things together, and you found yourself here. So I think that's really, really cool. What are your plans now? Like moving forward, what do you see for your future? How are things going? Where are we going from here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I guess, of course, as you know, I started in this particular role like about a year and maybe a year and a half-ish ago. So I think for me, the immediate next step is how can I be helpful? How can I be useful to Iterative to help the company take the next steps in its journey of growth? And I think this was one of the things for me when I left PathAI as well, is like I felt like I was no longer being as useful to the company anymore, right? And I think for me, the thing is, as long as I'm feeling like I'm having, a big impact at Interative and helping to make the company more successful, I feel like, it's a great opportunity for me to have a very positive impact on people. So that's one of the, immediate next steps. But beyond that, I think there's probably two directions that I have personally been thinking about, which is, one is thinking more about, hey, are there other companies could be created given where AI is going right now, right? Like, as we all know, there's obviously a lot of conversation about AI, about, chat GPT, and also other technology that has been coming up. I think this will lead to quite a fair bit of disruption in many different industries, and many that may not be quite, I don't know, like sexy or hot areas, but I think many, many areas are about to be impacted, right? So it's a place where I do think the technology can have a meaningful and important impact, and so that's something that I'm thinking about as like, hey, where could those areas be, right? So what that would look like would be like, could there be an opportunity to create a new company and have that impact directly? The other area that I've been thinking about is, I've been really fortunate that I had a good journey with like both Pathia and Iterative, where, Pathia, we started from nothing, like literally started in Andy's basement, raised through the 5 or 6 years, raised about $250 million from some of the best investors, built up a team that was, from nothing, just the two of us, to about 700 people.
Wow.
At the time that I left. And that teaches you a lot of things. So one of the areas that I've personally enjoyed is trying to give back to the community in the form of, advising other companies who are going through this whole transition, learning, like starting in the early stages. While there's many, I think, differences across businesses, there's also a whole lot of similarities that, you learn by making a lot of mistakes. And if somebody can help you, like overcome that, or tell you that, hey, think about this problem in this other way, rather than how you might be thinking about it now, you might be able to avoid certain missteps. So I've, been advising other companies, and I think one of the natural next steps from there is, going into investing and like thinking about, like, say, investing in companies that are doing these great things, right? So essentially, you can think of how do you multiply your impact, right? Like one is through the specific problem that you're solving, but you could also help to like fund companies that are solving important problems by like, providing access to those funds, right? And so to me, I think those are probably sort of next steps from here. And yeah, but the question is when's the right time? And, am I like continuing to be useful where I'm at?
So that was something interesting that you brought up, and I wanted to touch on that a little bit. So your previous experience building up the company from the basement, those are always very interesting stories to share and to speak through. Now you're talking about starting other companies, maybe investing, and now you've got that experience. And for our listeners, starting companies, what are some things maybe that you can share with us that you learned in your first journey that you would say, okay, these are mistakes that I would never make again, or this is something that I would say you have to do when you start on this journey? Maybe some time-saving tips or money-saving, even better.
So first off, I think everyone's journey is a little bit unique, right? So everyone has a slightly different bent on what they are more passionate about, less passionate about, and so on, right? So I would say from my perspective, as a tech person, one of the things I'm passionate about, as you can imagine, is the tech, right? But at the end of the day, I think one of the big lessons is that it hardly matters, like what really matters at the end of the day for building, a business. And, it's sort of in the definition of creating a company. You're building a for-profit business. Don't forget the profit part. Don't forget where the money is coming from. And I think as someone who has spent their whole career and life focused on the tech aspect of it, I think that was a big change, which was like always be thinking where's the money coming from, right? And don't just expect that if you build something cool, if you build something that's different, somebody is going to pay you for it, right? And that's the ultimate test of like, can you find enough people to pay you enough money for what you're building? And oftentimes, I think that's where most businesses end up failing. It's not that they can't deliver on the product or they can't deliver on the technology. It's that the thing that they have built has either it's like a nice to have, or like it's, no one's willing to pay for it. It's like, oh yeah, that's great. But if I ask you to pay me, even $10 for it and you're like, no, that's a bad sign, right? And so again, I'm not saying one person saying that is a bad sign, but if everyone you talk to is like, oh yeah, that would be great. But then they're like, and then you ask them, hey, can I get, like, would you pay $10 for this? Could we sign something that, for each user, you will pay X amount of money for it? If no one's willing to do that, you're not going to be successful, right? Like you're unlikely to be successful. So that's where I think this whole initial journey of finding this product market fit is like super, super important, that you try to understand where's the money coming from. And ideally, the best thing you can do is, you should think about how what you're building is making your customer more successful, right? And those are, I would say, the companies that have probably come the farthest. Is if your customer is better enabled for success based on, what you're doing, they're much more likely to keep coming back to you for the rest of time.
100%.
If you're not thinking about why they have to buy what you have, you're missing, like, even by asking them the question, will you pay for it? Yes, they might say yes. But if you don't connect the dots back to what will make their business more successful because of paying you for this, then they can essentially stop paying you for what, for the service, because it just becomes a nice to have. It's not essential to business success. I would say that's one of the big things. The other thing is, so that the other big thing is, starting a company means that you're going to be faced with all challenges, right? So think about it. Like in the basement, it was as much as like, we buy, like, who's going to build the table? Like, where's the computer coming from? How are you going to set up payroll, right? Like, what are some of your policies for like taking time off work? What are your working hours? Like literally, any company you join has sorted a lot of these things out.
Yeah.
But when you're starting something, nothing is figured out for you, right? And so you need to be versatile in figuring out how to do all those things. And again, these things are not necessarily like the most difficult, or like, you don't have to do groundbreaking stuff in every area, but you need to have, I think, some level of confidence. One is confidence. The second is like, just go online and read stuff, right? Like you're not alone in figuring some of these basics out, but you do need to figure these basics out. Don't be afraid of them, right? Like go online, read a few things. A lot of really smart people who have done this multiple times have talked about how to do these things in a reasonable way, and, just copy and paste and just do it, right? Focus your attention on the specific thing that differentiates you. Don't focus your attention on everything, because if you focus your attention on everything, you're actually not focusing. This is one thing that I've seen happen as companies grow up a little bit, is just trying to put their hands in too many, too many holes and too many things. And this, can start from an early time where it's like, oh, we need to get our HR policies just perfect. We need to get our payroll set up just perfect. No, you don't. Like, it just needs to be good enough such that it enables your business and company to be successful, right? Like, you decide what your points of differentiation are going to be. You can change those over time, but what it also, like when you make some of that decision, what it means is you stop focusing on all the other things that, can just be good enough. And I can tell you for me as like, so this is another random story, but growing up, one of the, and this is something that I guess continues to motivate me to this day is growing up, I was not too bad at school. So I would tend to score good marks in my tests, right? So essentially I might get 98, 99 out of 100. But what my grandfather would always ask me is like, where did you lose that one mark? Right. So that's something that I'm always being like, oh, I need to be perfect, or I'm striving for perfect on as many things as possible. So it's really hard to let go of like, hey, these things just need to be at the point of good enough. Right. And that's something that can be challenging, but is also a very critical thing you do because, as a small company, the most important thing you have is your time. And you need to decide where that time is best spent. Right. And so if you're too fixated on doing all the small things that are not going to, that are not critical to your success, you will not be focusing on the things that are. So that's just so maybe a few less. I mean, I've made a ton of mistakes along the way, learned a lot of things, but here's a few that I think might be helpful.
It sounds like you're very busy. You've got a lot of things on your plate, and if I remember correctly, you and your wife are together. You've both studied. You've both done really well. Where are you guys finding time to be, normal people?
Good question. So I think to add to the mix, we also just had a baby about a year and a half ago.
So congratulations.
I think between work, thank you. Yeah, I would say between work and playing with the baby and taking care of him, they're really it's a thing where I would say currently struggling with, which is finding time to do other things because I think as many I'm sure young parents know it's a lot of work and but the time with your child is just so valuable that and you're never getting this time back when they're this young. They're learning so many things. Honestly, it's like one of the most fascinating things I've done where it just I think it brings so much joy that I'm personally at least not as I'm not looking for joy into as many other places just because I have him and we're like him and our family. So we're able to spend that time together outside of work. But I think the thing that I've done is draw more boundaries with respect to work, which is I used to just basically keep going, all day, way past 6 p.m. I'd be in the office at 8, 9, 10 p.m. at times. I don't do that anymore, right? Since he was born, it's been hard stop at 6 p.m. And then I'm going to spend the rest of the time with him and my wife. And I think the part that we're still struggling with and working through is how can we create time for just the two of us? And that's been, I would say, a little bit more of a challenge. But overall, yeah, that's basically the sum total of my life is work plus baby.
Well, at least it sounds to me like...
No, it's probably not an inspiring answer, but it's the truth right now.
Nice. So look,
sorry, say that again.
It's okay. I think we have a small delay, but we'll edit that out later. I've got one more for you, maybe two. This is one of my favorites. If we have to put some words on your bedroom wall, okay, you wake up every day, you have to read the same slogan every day. What are we writing on your wall?
I think maybe might be something as simple as you can do it. Essentially just giving a little bit more. Yeah, I think for me, it's sort of just adding a little bit more confidence, thinking about I think going towards action, getting stuff done, focus on that you can do it. Just go for it.
Nice and easy. You can do it. Wake up. Starting that new business today. You can do it. Yes, I can. Out of bed. Let's get it done. Very,
Do
very
it.
nice. It can also come in handy in other aspects of life. I mean, it is quite versatile, and in the bedroom, it's a brilliant place to have it. So good for you. It's probably the best answer I've had. And then, any final words of wisdom? Anything you'd like to share with us before I let you go? Anything you want to reach out and say to any youngsters that are there, that are looking, they're ready to go? Final words of wisdom.
Maybe final words of wisdom is think about, like, maybe the thing to say is think about how you can make an impact, right? Like, make the world a better place. I think this was, I mean, for me personally, this was one of the most important learnings. Maybe the second one is like, listen to your wife. But like, this was how it came about. So initially, and I'll share a small story where so during my PhD, as I said, never focus on medical or anything bio-related. One of the interesting, impactful in some way projects that I worked on was that it was in predicting how popular an image is going to be before it's uploaded. So as you can imagine, that is quite cool and interesting for people, because they're like, oh, they take a bunch of photos and they're like, I want to pick the one that's going to get the most likes. And, it really helps drive the vanity in people. And then, it literally, was covered by popular press, like the BBC covered it, New York Times, etc. Right. And my website got millions of hits. It literally crashed because I couldn't handle it. And my wife asked me a simple question. It's like, how is this helping society? Like, you spent all of this time, took all these resources and all these wonderful institutions, studied all this stuff, and now you're helping people be more glued to their cell phones. And I was like, that is a great point. And I'm not, all the work I'm doing is not really making the world a better place. And while, it makes me feel good that there's so many people visiting my website and are excited about the work I'm doing, I don't know if it's fundamentally making society better. And so I think it has really helped me and my motivation to focus on something that has a big impact and, has an impact where I'm able to leave the world a better place than I found it. And so that's maybe the parting message. If you can, try to work on something that makes the world a better place. And I think for me, both Path AI and Interative are certainly doing that. I will, whatever the future holds will certainly be along the lines of making the world a better place. But, this doesn't mean it has to be medicine, but there's many, many other areas that could really impact people that are suffering from, various different, food shortages, water, disease. There's many issues around the world. Try to do something that will make the world a better place.
That's beautiful. Aditya, I want to say thank you very much for sharing that with us. And I really hope that your words strike a chord with the people that watch and hear them. As you know, obviously, we have no shortage of issues in the world that could be helped by ingenuity and a little bit of passion and dedication. So thank you for that. Very heartfelt. I want to wish you best of luck and say thanks again for joining us tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time and really good questions. Thank you.